The 2019 NBA draft class was called many things before draft day came, and one of those words was most definitely underwhelming. But there were two people who were supposed to be guarantees and automatic stars in this league and who was supposed to take the league over. And their names were Zion Williamson and Ja Morant, the number 1 and 2 picks of the 2019 NBA draft. With their mix of god-tier athleticism, highlight reel potential, all-around play, and the biggest praise from everyone, their potential to be top players in this league, the fact they went number 1 and number 2 in the class was a no-brainer and treated as such, being hailed as the next faces of the NBA. But 6 years later on both sides, all we've seen is disappointment, controversy, and a very uncertain future for both players. For Zion, he has yet to play in a playoff game, has been characterized for his lack of control off the court with his lust and weight issues, and of course, only playing more than 60 games in the season twice so far. While for Ja, who has seen more success on the court with his team, cannot stay healthy to be on the court, and at one point was viewed as public enemy number 1 by the league for his actions off the court, and if it wasn't for the fact that Adam Silver was the commissioner, could have been out the league. This is the chaotic careers of the 2019 draft's biggest stars, and today we'll be learning which led them to their current positions right now in the NBA and their future potential in this league. With that being said, if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to like the video, and now we are officially on the road to 100,000 subscribers, so be sure to subscribe to be a part of that, and of course, to catch more videos. But as usual, this will be a long one, but you already know who it is, right?
Before we go any further,
The trading card boom is here and stronger than ever. Pokemon, baseball, football, soccer, wrestling, and of course my favorite, basketball. And with the sponsor of today's video, once again, an Arena Club, you can join the boom, collect cards from many different genres, and enjoy the many different features of the website itself. Whether it's the full transparency they guarantee that show you the odds of the cards and what you can pull from their packs, the ability to sell, auction, or even have Arena Club send you the physical card itself to have for yourself for your physical collection, or just the ability to buy low and pull high on a card that is worth thousands of dollars. Speaking of which, let's see who I pull with my very own Ruby pack today and who will be a part of my growing collection.
Sexton got it! He got it! He got it! Roll Tide! They did it!
Colin Sexton, lottery pick, Alabama one and done, and an absolute sick card to own with this Panini Cornerstones downtown design, featuring a mix of downtown Cleveland, Ohio, and Cavaliers from across time for a cool combination for a basketball card. So whether you're buying, selling, or just wanting to make the coolest collection in a growing community every day, Arena Club can provide it all. But obviously, you should be missing out on the next innovation of card collecting. Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/Alvini and using the code Alvini. Again, this is arenaclub.com/Alvini for 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase, because you don't want to miss out on one of the most seamless trading card experiences online there is. Thank you again to Arena Club for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. With the first and second overall picks of the 2019 NBA draft, we have Zion Williamson from Duke and Ja Morant from Murray State. The 2019 class had a lot of uncertainties and question marks all over the board, but when it came to those two, it was an absolute no-brainer and guarantee that they were going to be something special in the league with time. Zion Williamson has been a well-known name in the basketball space ever since he was in high school, as he was physically dominating his peers and looking good while doing it with his high-flying and powerful dunks, volleyball swatting blocks, and putting the fear of God into his opponents. Now, was his competition consistently all that good? No, but honestly, who cares? And as the second-ranked player on ESPN and 7th on 24/7 Sports, his hype was at an all-time high, creating a historic trio with himself, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish all going to Duke. People waited to see if his game would translate to the NCAA ranks, and Zion absolutely exceeded expectations with one of the best all-time freshman seasons of all time at Duke. With 22 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2 steals, and nearly 2 blocks while making 68% of his total shots, which led the NCAA, and even better, 74% of his twos, It was an absolute nightmare to go against him even in college. And remember, he was 6'6" doing this and was making the NCAA look like children compared to him. With this, he would also prove himself time and time again worthy of the hype and would even become the player of the year that year as a freshman, which made him the third ever to do it. But Ja Morant's story is entirely different as a 3-star recruit who went to the mid-major Murray State and looked great for a freshman who started his entire season. But his sophomore year is where he'd start getting national attention, and it was because of his high-flying dunks, which seemed like every game he either dunk on someone or do something crazy in transition. But he wasn't one-dimensional by any means. He was also one of the best finishers in the NCAA, converting on nearly 50% of his shots, and even led the entire NCAA with 24 points per game and 10 assists a night, being the heart and soul of his team. And then when you add in his triple-double performance and an upset win against 5th-ranked Marquette in the tournament, he was a shoo-in to at least be a top 5 pick. So with Zion being drafted by the Pelicans, looking for a new start with Anthony Davis soon being traded to the Lakers, and Ja Morant joining a post-grit and grind Grizzlies team, who would soon see Marc Gasol be traded to Toronto and Mike Conley soon to be traded to the Utah Jazz, both of these men will be entrusted to be the next generational stars of their small market teams and lead them to the promised land. It may take a while, but as both teams improve their rosters and both of these players improve on their own skill sets, there is real potential for them to become the NBA's next generation's best and brightest, and everyone will be watching to see if they live up to them expectations on and off the court. But off the rip, we already see potential signs for the future for one of our stars. During the Summer League, Zion Williamson was doing his usual manhandling of the competition. Shout out him absolutely destroying Kevin Knox on that one rip away for the dunk. And despite it only lasting 1 half due to a knee-to-knee collision that luckily didn't come with any major setbacks, the real red flag to start his career was his 2nd ever preseason game against the Miami Heat, where he drove in against Dwayne Dedmon, took one wrong step, and considering the force that he drives in with, he ended up tearing his meniscus without even playing his first regular season minute. A potential season-ending injury that requires major surgery, but let's not act like this is a career ender. We've seen the likes of players like him who've missed on a lot of time due to something similar and came back even stronger to it. Ben Simmons and Blake Griffin come to mind immediately. So that does mean that the main star people will be looking at in this class as Zion Williamson heals will be Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies. And off the jump, Ja Morant touched down in Memphis, and immediately he continued to play like he was back at Murray State. Whether it was his 30-point game and only his 3rd game in his career, and throwing the game-winning assist to Jay Crowder in overtime to beat the Nets, earning his first ever double-double and making a game-winning layup against the Hornets in his 10th ever game, his 3-month streak of winning the Rookie of the Year for the West from November to January, or even his first ever triple-double against the Miami Heat in early February. Ja Morant, while obviously showing some rawness to his overall game, is showing the NBA world that he is going to be a star in this league someday. But despite Ja's promising start to his career, the limelight gets immediately taken from him as the big news is here that everyone was hoping for. Zion Williamson is healed and ready to make his career debut on January 22nd, 2020 against the San Antonio Spurs. But with that clear caveat from the organization being that Zion Williamson will be on a strict minutes restriction, as the season for the Pelicans at this time is basically over, and they simply want to see how he does and get him used to the NBA game and don't want to risk another long-term injury. And while the NBA fans all over are bummed out, it makes sense. First, he had his shoe explosion at Duke, and now a torn meniscus. It's best to save him as much as possible so we can get a full season of the Zion Williamson experience. And his debut was something to behold for sure. In 18 minutes of play, he would go 8 of 11, go 4 of 4 from 3, and score 22 points, showing his dominance inside and more impressively outside. Now, most people can understand that this won't be very common for him, but if he ever does get a consistent jump shot, that would be amazing. And as Zion continued to get back into the swing of things, you'd see more and more improvement and him becoming more and more comfortable in the NBA game by game. In his first full month of basketball in February, where he won Rookie of the Month, he impressed for 25 points and was dominant in the paint, converting on 57% of his twos. In that month also, it would show that the Pelicans can even win with Zion going 6-4 in that month. And while this wasn't groundbreaking for the team, it was for sure a good thing to see from your #1 overall pick, especially after an injury like that earlier in the year. But of course, we all know how the 2020 season would end for both sides. Once again, COVID closed down the league, and as both the Pelicans and Grizzlies would miss out on the playoffs after their time in the NBA bubble, their season would end on interesting notes. But there is a lot to celebrate on both ends for both players. Ja Morant will be celebrated as the NBA's Rookie of the Year in near unanimous fashion, and it's for a very good reason, being one of the brightest spots in a very underwhelming 2019 rookie class, leading the class in both assists and total points. He will easily be one of, if not the first all-star to come out of this class as a clear headliner for the Grizzlies once they improve all around. And despite only playing 24 games, the sky is the absolute limit for Zion Williamson, once again showing that his play style can still be dominant in this league despite his size, truly becoming the Charles Barkley of our generation. Once he gets his body where he needs to be, he will truly be a top 20 to 15 player as soon as next season, because he was truly that good as a rookie in limited time. He just needs to continue to learn the NBA way, keep himself healthy, and lead his team to wins. So, as the curtains close on the rookie season of two promising top picks, it is only up from here for both of them as they continue to chase after the goal of becoming the league's best. However, both of them would end up on opposite sides, narrative-wise, next season. Our two stars of the 2019 class in their own way have given us many things to be impressed by in their rookie season. But obviously, due to his perceived hype, Zion Williamson is the person most people are going to be focusing on for the foreseeable future unless Ja Morant jumps into the same level as him. Zion looked like an all-star level player in his first season despite it only lasting 24 games, while Ja Morant still has some features of his game to improve on, but obviously having a very decent start to things. But the Zion Williamson hype is once again real from everyone, especially with the newest NBA 2K game gracing him as the cover of 2K21. A very bold decision by them, and it gets even bolder by the fact that ESPN had Zion ranked as the 23rd best player coming into the 2021 season. But even Ja Morant was able to get some praise from the national media, being ranked as the 31st best player in the league by ESPN lists also. But the world wants to see how Zion's first full season will go, and once again see if he can live up to the massive hype. And a lot of changes are coming behind the scenes to try to get him closer to that goal. Alvin Gentry will soon be replaced by Stan Van Gundy. Drew Holiday will be traded in a 3-team deal to get back Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. And overall, the Pelicans were looking like a very interesting team for Zion to make use of. Not the best fit overall for him, but maybe management knew something that we didn't. But for Ja, his team keeps things relatively normal and just progress things forward to see what another year of development would look like for this young Memphis Grizzlies team. So let's focus on the main event himself in Zion Williamson, who came into the season with 0 injuries, with a full summer of training, and with that coming fully prepared for a full NBA season. As the first overall pick in his class and praised as a generational prospect, he proved the doubters wrong, and his supporters got to see one of the best seasons ever for a 20-year-old player. 27 points per game while making a league-high 12 twos a night at his size is something absolutely unheard of, especially when you factor in the fact that Zion was doing this while making 62% of his two-pointers. And as you look deeper at his second season, his dominance inside the arc was even at a historical level, seeing him score 20 points or more a game while getting 50% or higher a night for 25 straight games, which tied the legend of Shaquille O'Neal's record. That should tell you all you need to know. Zion is a mini wrecking ball, and even his peers in the NBA have no way of stopping him. The only problem limiting Zion as of right now is the fact that his team around him isn't very up to par, and they're not winning very many games. The Pelicans would also own one of the most unique offenses out there, but they struggled mightily on defense. At even one point, his coach, Stan Van Gundy, wanted to see Zion do more on offense and become their offensive hub, and nicknaming him Point Zion, because he was just that good as an offensive product. But while Zion Williamson is putting up a historic season for his age, and after that injury from last season, Ja Morant is looking oddly different. People thought he'd become more comfortable in the NBA after a more than impressive rookie season and improve on top of that, but it was anything but that. And it starts very early on in the season in his third game against the Brooklyn Nets, where he wildly tries to block Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot and deeply sprains his ankle. The injury was so bad that he had to be wheelchaired out of the game, as he couldn't even put any weight on it, and it gave people a deep fear that he might have done something much worse to it. Luckily, it was only a grade 2 ankle sprain, but people will look back at this injury in the second season as a very crucial point in the year, because Ja Morant didn't look the same after it. Ja Morant overall in the second season didn't improve much in his overall game compared to the year before, and some people even argued he looked slightly worse. Now, he did score more points per game, but as you look at all his other counting stats, it was basically the same as last year. But what the Grizzlies see more improvement in their win totals, despite Ja Morant not really taking that leap he wanted to see. They are now maintaining for a playoff spot in a comfortable ninth-seeded position, maintaining a near 500 record all year. Did fans want to see more out of Ja Morant? Yes, they did. But also, fans need to realize that being a point guard in the NBA is the hardest position to play. Historically speaking, it takes them the longest to get used to things, mainly due to having to play with much bigger and physical people than them. To some, it's like a rite of passage. If you can make it to the NBA as a point guard, you can literally make it anywhere. Some people even compared his lack of real progression to a sophomore slump, despite him not being too far off his rookie season, really. Overall, you hope for more, but we're just going to have to continue to wait and see if Ja continues to progress in some way. But as the All-Star break came, Zion Williamson, for the first time in his career, was awarded a spot on the NBA's All-Star team as a starter, becoming one of the youngest starters in NBA All-Star game history. It absolutely was deserved, and people are excited for many on top of many more years and appearances from him at that spot in the future if he continues to do what he's doing now and keeping his health in check. But while both of these players are on opposite ends individually, you can certainly say the same thing about their team's success. Come near the end of the season, the Pelicans are only a few games away from the 10th spot for a chance at the NBA playoffs, because with the new NBA play-in format, teams like the Pelicans and the Grizzlies can sneak their way into the 8th seed if they beat who is ever in front of them. But while the Grizzlies are continuing to solidify themselves as the 9th seed in the West, the Pelicans get horrible news once again from a very familiar name. While already playing with an injured hand during the end parts of the season to get his team into the play-in, he would unfortunately make it even worse when going up for a rebound on Kevon Looney and fractured his left ring finger, now once again shutting him down for some time. But you know what? The man has played all but 10 games, and it ended on a very fixable injury while they are already multiple games behind making the 10th seed. This won't be something that'll hinder his NBA career by any means, and it just does mean that once again, he'll get some major time off to recover and become even better for next season. So with the Zion hype being toned down once again due to injury, we can focus back on Ja Morant full time, who finished top 10 in assists per game and total assists, and we have the first ever test in his postseason career. With a 38-34 record, he gets the honors of trying to make the NBA playoffs for the first time as the 9th seed, meaning he has to beat the 10th seeded San Antonio Spurs and whoever loses out of the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Lakers. The game versus the Spurs was mostly controlled by the Grizzlies, who would see 3 20-point scores, including Ja Morant, control the game and a tight 4-point win. But after LeBron James's game winner against the Warriors, Stephen Curry and company were waiting to go on and claim their spot as the 8th seed in the very next game. But in this game between the Warriors and the Grizzlies, we witnessed one of Ja Morant's best performances in his career, with the chance of making it to the playoffs for the first time ever. 35 points, 5 of 10 from 3, 4 steals, and 19 of those points in the second half. However, the Grizzlies did blow a lead at the end of the game, which brought the game into OT, but the Grizzlies would once again rally in overtime to ruin the Warriors' chances of making the 8th seed off of the backs of Ja Morant and 5 other players scoring in double figures. And while they can celebrate for a moment, they still have to play way above their talent level against the best 3-point shooting team in the NBA, the Utah Jazz, in the first round of the 2021 NBA playoffs. But off that last game, the Grizzlies would even surprise the Jazz in game 1 off of Ja Morant and Dillon Brooks combining for 57 points and a 3-point win. But after that, it was all in Utah's control. Ja Morant did give us one more moment of basketball superstardom in the playoffs with a 47-point career-high game in game 2. However, they would lose that game due to 19 made threes from the Jazz, and would lose the next 3, ending their season in the first round. Now, you really can't help but be proud of how things are turning around so quickly for the Grizzlies in a brand new era, especially with how Ja Morant into the season. Big things should be on the horizon for both him and Zion Williamson if they keep things up. Ja Morant has a consistent and young core to base his play around for the next 5 years or so, and while Zion's team is kind of botched at the moment with Stan Van Gundy mutually parting ways with the Pelicans and now looking for a new coach, at least the Pelicans know that they have a beast of a player to try to build their team around. The future is looking up for these two, but just like last year, how the narratives got switched, it'll get switched once again, but this time in a very extreme way. So, another year of progress for both of our stars and more setup for them to succeed in the future. Over the summer, we see that plan for both teams to invest in some way with their top picks to take them closer to the promised land and to rely on them more. We already talked about how the Pelicans walked away from Stan Van Gundy, but over the summer, they proceeded to fully invest into the Zion Williamson experience, trading Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe for Jonas Valanciunas and incoming rookie Trey Murphy III to spread the floor for Zion, while the Grizzlies are investing more into their young talent like Santi Aldama and Zaire Williams from the draft. But considering how Zion's season turned out last year and how Ja Morant's first ever postseason turned out, you can't help but be excited to see how their third years will turn out. But one of those players that we're going to talk about today is going to have yet another setback that would annoy many and would change the narrative around this player for a long time. During the preseason, David Griffin and the front office would do their usual preseason meetings with the media, and Griffin would drop a nuke on the NBA that they couldn't hide anymore. Zion Williamson, during the early parts of the offseason, has suffered a Jones fracture in his left foot. While the Pelicans were optimistic that he would heal before the season started, Griffin mentioned he is now behind schedule and would be forced to be sat out for, let's hope, a few more weeks. But while some focus on the injury itself, another unfortunate circumstance for him showed up, and it made for a lot of news because Zion Williamson really picked up some weight in the offseason also during this injury. He's fat! That was really noticed in a Mountain Dew commercial where he clearly looks overweight compared to what he usually looks like. And for obvious reasons, he can't exactly work out with a fractured foot. So just like Joel Embiid sipping Shirley Temples during his time of rehab, yes, that's a real story, I guess Zion got a little bit too comfortable and gained some massive pounds. It is safe to say that his metabolism just isn't the best. And if his weight ballooned just like that over one summer, then I can't imagine that Zion's making the right decision somewhere for this to happen. I'm saying all of this to say that it might take him a bit longer to bounce back into shape and get back into where he needs to be. But where does that leave us with this situation? Well, Ja Morant is all to himself as the best active player in the 2019 NBA draft class, and it's time to see if he can build upon his first ever postseason appearance and improve like people wanted to see. But I don't think people were expecting what they were going to get from the 2022 Memphis Grizzlies and Ja Morant.
Rebound by Adams, his sixth. Morant blows by Primo. Attack! Morant, 3 seconds. He drives, banks, hit in with 5/10. And now with a chance for the lead. Morant against Towns. Ja, 3 for the lead. Bingo! Oh my goodness! Matisse Thybulle guards Morant. He drives the lane, hangs, puts it up and in, and a foul! Ja Morant!
Bias for Bain. Does hands it off to Ja. Ja behind his back. Ja to the basket. Ja off the glass and in as he hangs in the air again.
If you wanted to know what a peak version of Ja Morant would look like out of college, this is it. Fluid, slithery, unguardable in the air, and a lot of fun to watch while also leading his teams to victory. The team Ja Morant had along him alongside his one and only coach so far in Taylor Jenkins turned this squad into one of the top teams in the NBA while also maximizing nearly every player in the rotation. But considering this is a video about Ja, we'll focus on him primarily and the others briefly. Now, things were always the best for the Grizzlies, starting off with a 9-10 record to start the season, but after that, the Grizzlies just all out of nowhere figured it out. And the weird part was that turning point was after an injury to Ja Morant himself against the Hawks on November the 26th, 2021. Because Ja Morant's depth all over the team was just that good. Whether his backcourt partner in Desmond Bane, who doubled his points per game average compared to last year, Jaren Jackson Jr., DeAnthony Melton, or even Brandon Clark off the bench. During the season, interestingly enough, the Grizzlies had a record of 20-5 without Ja Morant, but when he did play, he was dominant. With Ja Morant, he would go on and soar his averages from 19 points per game to 27 points per game, putting him as one of the top scorers in the NBA, while also having his best ever season efficiency-wise, which only made his case better as one of the best point guards in the NBA. And with a 41-19 record come All-Star Weekend, which ranked 3rd in the Western Conference, the Grizzlies are now in contention status for the first time in a long time, and it was being led by Ja Morant and his teammates. And even better, Ja Morant, just like Zion last year, will become a first-time All-Star starter in his first year as an All-Star, signifying him as one of the league's best. Speaking of Zion, the narrative about his injury was that he'd be back in a month's time, but as the season continued, his foot injury would continue to be pushed back more and more. It went from a few weeks into the season to getting back into team activities to now dealing with foot soreness and getting an injection in his foot to deal with the healing of his bone. And finally, in January, Zion Williamson and the Pelicans announced he continued his rehab away from the team, specifically in Portland, Oregon. Some of y'all know exactly what was happening there, but give it some time. I'll talk about that soon. The Zion Williamson saga continues to be hopeless as his injuries and struggle coming back gets more and more annoying to witness, especially if you are a Pelicans fan. But now with the media taking extra shots at Zion, it just seemed like his reputation around the league was now at an all-time low, despite it being only 3 years of him being in the NBA. But no matter who you are, you can't lie and say that this isn't a cause of concern for his future in the league. Despite all that though, the Pelicans would continue to try and invest in Zion and trade for CJ McCollum for the Portland Trail Blazers to serve as the shooting guard of the foreseeable future, trading him for a relatively cheap price. This trade was a real needle mover, luckily, as the Pelicans are hanging by a thread as the 9th or 10th seed as they try to make the playoffs for the first time in a long time, while patiently waiting for Zion to get healthy so he can play in the postseason. Both players are now at completely different ends of the NBA right now, as one struggles to even get on the court, while the other is on top of the most improved player race and is even considered to be a dark horse MVP candidate this year. Of course, Ja himself has injuries from time to time, but nothing as bad and long-term as Zion has had in his career. So now let's skip to the end of the season. Ja Morant has led the Memphis Grizzlies to their best record in franchise history with a 56-26 record, is a part of the All-NBA second team, and now has officially won the 2022 Most Improved Player Award in very controversial fashion, considering his rise was more expected than anything, and a lot of people didn't like the fact that he won it as a 2nd overall pick who simply just shot the ball more. But you know what? He gave the trophy to Desmond Bane, who many seen as a real candidate for this award because, again, he literally doubled his points. So while the Grizzlies are waiting to test themselves in the NBA playoffs, we are back to check up on Zion, who is officially back on the court. On March 22nd, 2022, he will post a video of himself looking back to normal and dunking the basketball like he never left, and is also back to doing one-on-one work with the Pelicans. It finally looked like we was going to get past this foot injury saga, and Zion can help the Pelicans make the 8th seed in the NBA play-in tournament. But on April 11th, 2022, we get the news that added yet another blow to Zion Williamson's reputation with this quote of the year. Physically, I'm fine. Now it's just a matter of when I feel like Zion. I know the atmosphere I'd be entering based off like the NBA playoff experience, so now it's just a matter of when I feel like Zion. This quote did more damage than you can ever imagine at the time, because it's simply the fact that Zion has all of these expectations placed on him, and finally, when he's healthy enough to go out there and produce at the biggest stage, and the team itself has been investing for him to take over, he chooses not to play in the NBA play-in. And as you'd imagine, no one liked that reaction. I can sympathize with him playing a sport that is equally mentally demanding as it is physically, but considering the franchise, the city, and his own teammates rely on him, to let them down like this has to hurt big time from all over. But again, he makes his case and he makes it well. It's a little bit of a mental battle because, you know, when I re-aggravated the injury back in February, it was tough. So when I make certain moves, there's a hesitation. Sometimes there's not, and sometimes there is. And I understand the magnitude of these games coming up, and I don't want to be out there hesitating or doing something that may affect my team in a bad way. So now with this news, going into the play-in without Zion, how do the Pelicans produce without him? Well, they win both of their play-in games and make it to the playoffs for the first time, and without Zion Williamson, they will be facing the Phoenix Suns and give us a very entertaining series while also showcasing how much Zion gets to inherit once he is healthy, because the Pelicans only became better without Zion there. But for the Grizzlies, their reward is facing a young and hungry Minnesota Timberwolves team with home court advantage, as we get to see if Ja Morant can replicate the same playoff surge he produced last year. And this series between two young teams would be interesting from all angles. Blowouts, blown leads, narratives being proven once again, and weirdly enough, Ja Morant looking like a mortal in this first round. With averages of 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 assists a night, without looking too deep, you'd think that he was damn near unstoppable as usual. But as you look closer at the fact that he shot 38% from the field and 20% from 3, this is a far cry from his performances in the regular season, and it was costing the Grizzlies at times. He did come through at moments at times, like when he came up with a crucial game winner in Game 5 off of defensive lapse from Anthony Edwards, but overall, once they won Game 6, the real hero was shown to be his backcourt partner in Desmond Bane. But no worries at all, basketball is a team sport, and the Grizzlies are a deep team with many weapons who can produce when the time comes. But while they celebrate making it past the first round for the first time since 2015, now the stakes are even higher, having to face now the Golden State Warriors, who are looking to get back on top after their time with Kevin Durant. But whether it was a matchup issue or just a plain bad series from Ja Morant, he went from bad versus the Timberwolves and then went into the Warriors series looking damn near unstoppable. 34 points in Game 1, but unfortunately losing to a Klay Thompson game winner with 34 seconds left, and then became even better with a playoff career high of 47 points in Game 2 for the win, which ended with an amazing 18-point fourth quarter to tie the series up 1-1. With the way he is playing, there's a real chance the Grizzlies can make it to the conference finals for the second time in their history with how great Ja Morant is playing. But all that optimism would go right into the toilet in the fourth quarter of Game 3. Despite another great game from Ja Morant, he would let himself get into an awkward position with Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole in a loose ball situation and would be diagnosed with a knee bone bruise, thus ending his season prematurely once again. And as you'd imagine, the Grizzlies would fall to the Warriors in just a few more games due to Ja Morant being out. One player gets injured early on and doesn't return, and the other one gets injured at a very crucial moment in the season, leaving his team to lose. Obviously, just like Zion, Ja's injury came from an unfortunate, unlucky play, but once again, if you're a fan of the Grizzlies, all you can say is that you'll be back better than ever next season. And this season is just another step towards the ultimate goal. While if you're a Pelicans fan, all you can hope for is that Zion avoids injury again during the offseason and he gets back to that second season status, as in 3 seasons so far in the NBA, he has only played 85 total games. But if there's one thing these two players need to avoid to get anywhere far, it's injuries altogether, because most of these seasons so far we talked about, it has always ended prematurely in some way. So both teams knows what they need to do in 2023. Keep both of these future stars healthy, put a squad around them, and then return with profit. But first, the 2 top picks need to be paid for the future and be locked down as the true future cornerstones of their teams. Once again, as the curtains close on yet another interesting season for both these players, you can't help but want more from them on the court. So let's just see if the future investment on both sides is going to turn into anything or just burn in front of their very eyes. The summer of 2022 is going to be a very pivotal time for both the Memphis Grizzlies and the New Orleans Pelicans, because both Ja Morant and Zion Williamson are looking to get paid now that their rookie deals are coming to an end. But while Ja Morant came easy with a 5-year, $231 million deal, the complete opposite came for Zion Williamson, as the Pelicans had to be realistic and deem Zion as a red flag due to his health. But luckily, both sides came together and agreed on a 5-year, $197 million deal later that summer. However, it came with some unique features to it. The main one being that only the first 2 years of the contract are guaranteed, because if he doesn't meet both a games played and a weight threshold from 2026 to 2028, the Pelicans can take away some of the money from him. Specifically, Zion would have to play up to 61 games or more to regain the full value of his money from the season, and for his weight, it has to be under 295 pounds. Truly one of the most unique stories you will ever hear from an NBA superstar of all time. But at least he has a few more seasons to get himself together. But again, one of the weirdest contracts you'll ever see in NBA history. But while Zion was making the news for his contract all summer, Ja Morant was showing a new side of himself after being eliminated by the Golden State Warriors. May 14th, 2022, literally a day after getting eliminated in a game he didn't play. During the series, Ja Morant was posting some pretty cryptic tweets that some people weren't exactly understanding, but most just brushed it aside as Ja being Ja, because obviously he's a pretty big personality on the court. But a day after losing to the Warriors, Jonathan Kuminga would post a tweet that read simply as this: "Whoop that trick," which is now a deleted tweet on Twitter. Then Ja Morant responds as banter saying, "Gotta earn some stripes first, kid." Again, simple banter. It's a true statement. We can all move along. But because this is the internet and social media we are talking about here, not everyone is going to agree with what Ja Morant says. So a fan responds, "My bad, I didn't know you were pussy whipped." Now, if you're a celebrity or even a big public figure, you're going to have some detractors, that's fine. But we get a rare response from Ja Morant, and a very infamous response saying simply, "It's free to see how hollows feel," which is basically him threatening a fan online with gun violence. The tweet was quickly deleted, but it was way too late. Ja Morant became the subject of the day for that on social media and on television. We can just chalk it up to a moment of weakness or whatever it may be, but really it just wasn't a good look for Morant at all. However, Morant just kept ending up in the news for more actions off the court, furthering his decline reputation-wise around the league. Whether it was his incident in July at a shoe store where his mom used Ja Morant and his friends as an intimidation factor that caused the security of the store to call police, or a few days later when Ja Morant threatened another security guard at a Memphis mall, which again caused for another police report to be made, or later that month during a pickup basketball game where Ja Morant apparently punched a 17-year-old, and according to said 17-year-old, he went back into his house, grabbed a gun, and threatened the 17-year-old with it. And lastly, right before the preseason, during Ja Morant's sister's volleyball game, apparently there was yet another altercation with the family and his friends, as his sister was being talked to in a way that they did not appreciate. It was a very headline-filled summer for both players in one way or another, but the worst Ja Morant got out of it was some negative PR, and for Zion, he just needs to remain healthy to get the full value of his contract. Both stars are healthy, both stars are ready to start the season, and now it's time to see if both of these players can meet each other at the top of the Western Conference. And as the season started, you once again seen that all both teams needed was a fully healthy roster. Zion Williamson and Ja Morant to start the year were back to their regularly scheduled dominance on the court, as Ja Morant would witness his teammates in Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. become true offensive threats, and the Grizzlies in general becoming a much more dangerous team off of it, continuing to build off their season from last year. But the real surprise and much needed confirmation a lot of people needed was Zion Williamson being back to his normal self, and even better, the Pelicans winning games, and a lot of them. The Pelicans already became stronger as a unit after Zion was out all year last year, and even threatened the Suns in the first round as an 8th seed. Now, when you place them back into the lineup, the Pelicans are setting the Western Conference on fire with their mix of defensive versatility and their big three offensively leading the way, with Zion being the main headliner. This is all anyone has been waiting to see from a Zion-led team, but people hope that the injury-filled years are behind them and Zion can go on and stay this way. And if you want to hear something even more interesting, from December 7th to December 18th, the Pelicans and the Grizzlies were fighting for the first and second seed in the West, showing the narrative of those two taking over the league were real, and we could really see a rivalry between those two for a long time. But just when you thought things were going to turn around for both of these players, it all falls down once again. January 2nd, 2023, literally after running up the court on a fast break, Zion Williamson passes the ball to CJ McCollum and is obviously hobbling off the court. Why? Because he literally just blew out his hamstring. His body once again has had enough, and he put too much stress on his lower body. David Griffin said that he'll be out until the end of the month, right before the All-Star break, but we're just gonna have to wait and see the end result of that rumor, because he is giving the NBA world what it's been wanting to see, and it just cannot last only 29 measly games. But January wasn't only interesting for that alone. At the end of the month, after a game versus the Indiana Pacers, there was some rumblings from the Pacers staff and players that after their game, there was a red light pointed at them at the team bus, and they claimed that it came from a car containing Ja Morant and his friends. And what made this story even more damning is the fact that one of Ja Morant's friends got into a verbal altercation that ended with him getting thrown out of the game and even banned from the Memphis Grizzlies arena for a year. But the NBA investigated and they couldn't find any solid evidence to be able to punish anyone. But man, Ja Morant seems to be getting in way too many situations lately, and I can only imagine it's going to become a disturbance soon for the Memphis Grizzlies, and worse, the NBA as a brand, and something will need to be done. But come the All-Star weekend, for the first time, both Ja Morant and Zion Williamson have become All-Stars at the same time together. But the good news will only last so long, because a few days before the All-Star break, the Pelicans once again tell the world that Zion Williamson will be missing additional time due to his hamstring issue. At this point in the season, the Pelicans are drowning without him, going 7-14 since the injury, and even worse, including a 10-game losing streak, and seeing them drop to the 7th seed of the Western Conference at the All-Star break. If he returns, then at least the Pelicans can make the playoffs, but obviously what we don't want to see is the same old song and dance over and over again for yet another season. But once you skip another month, same report, Zion needs more time, and the Pelicans are losing more and more games due to him being gone. The only saving grace is the fact that they are most likely going to stay in the play-in race. But while March is a frustrating month for the Pelicans, it's even worse for the Memphis Grizzlies. March 4th, 2023, Ja Morant goes on an Instagram live in a Colorado nightclub, having a good time and doing whatever people do in the club. I really don't know. I'm a homebody. Anyways, during a song, he makes one of the biggest mistakes of his life. He flashes a gun. Thankfully, no one saw it, which could have caused an even bigger issue, but Ja Morant's PR, which was already shaky as it is, was only going to become 1,000 times worse, as now he has lost all plausible deniability he had from all of his past incidents. As you'd see and imagine from this tiny 15-second video of him, it became national news, because as a representation of the NBA, a role model to some, and even worse to himself, this did some real damage from all over. And the craziest thing is, no one could imagine why he would do this in the first place. I mean, let's not act like his dad isn't the same person who tried to get into a fight with Shannon Sharpe at the Lakers game earlier this year. But what is even funnier is the fact that some people legit looked into his upbringing in South Carolina and were even more confused on how he could act like this. Ja Morant would end up leaving the team during this incident, but the NBA had to make a decision on how to punish him, and it was a swift and simple resolution. 8 games without pay, which ESPN calculated as Ja Morant having to forfeit over $600,000 of his contract due to a 15-second clip. Ja's conduct was irresponsible, reckless, and potentially very dangerous. It also has serious consequences given his enormous following and influence, particularly among young fans who look up to him. He has expressed sincere contrition and remorse for his behavior. Ja has also made it clear to me that he has learned from this incident and that he understands his obligation and responsibility to the Memphis Grizzlies and the broader NBA community, extending well beyond his play on the court. Now, saying he will change and him actually doing it is two entirely different things. So all we can hope for is that he learned his lesson. I mean, it is just so very simple. Don't show off a gun on Instagram Live when you are a person of influence. Outside of that, it's free game. But again, it really makes you think. But with that situation out of the way, we once again get the same old tired out news. Zion Williamson will be out for the rest of the season due to his hamstring injury, and the NBA world is once again not given a chance to see Zion Williamson in the playoffs. And the Pelicans fans all around are annoyed at yet another season wasted with a 42-40 record and losing in the play-in to the OKC Thunder. For the Grizzlies, though, despite all the distractions from Ja Morant they get their second 51 season in a row and own the second best record in the Western Conference. And in front of them to start the playoffs is a series where, for once, the 7th seed is favored by some people, or at least more people than usual, and it is the Los Angeles Lakers, led by LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and their rejuvenated young core players that they just traded for to get out of the Russell Westbrook deal they made a few years ago. Of course, as a young team, and considering this is the Western Conference we are talking about here, some of these matchups can really go either way. And the first game would prove to everyone who thought that way to be right, especially after Ja Morant would once again get hurt at the worst possible time.
Ja Morant gets into the paint. Plays catch with Jackson, 5 on the 24. Vanderbilt trying to stay with him. Morant inside. Offensive foul. Anthony Davis steps in and draws the charge. Everything defensively. And that's 3 on Morant. Morant's shaken up.
People from all over continue to say season after season that Ja Morant might be forced to relive the same career path as Derrick Rose, who used his athleticism as much as possible in games. And Ja Morant trying to fly in the air would collide with Anthony Davis trying to take a charge and would come down and sprain his wrist. And even with his teammates winning game 2, the people who seen the 7-2 upset coming got it right. He returned back in game 3 and played his best game of the series with a 45-point game and almost getting a triple-double, but still losing due to the Lakers' depth coming together for the win. And with another L for the Grizzlies in game 4, the Grizzlies' back were against the wall, now down 3-1. And the Lakers got the job done in game 6 in a dominant win. And despite people seeing it coming, or at least some of them, now we are at the point where both sides of the coin are disappointed. The Pelicans can't get a full season out of Zion, or at least have him for the playoffs. Now the Grizzlies can't even get out of the first round despite their amazing regular season efforts. But you know what? Zion will be back for the beginning of the season next year, and maybe things will go right this time. But the same cannot be said about Ja Morant, who during the postseason, only a month after losing in game 6, is yet again in another gun-related controversy. On yet another Instagram live with the same friend who got booted from the Grizzlies and Pacers game, is in a car listening to a song, and yet again at the heat of the moment flashes another gun for everyone in that live to see. And funny enough, the friend even notices him doing this and tries to move it out of the frame, but it was way too late. They got all the evidence they needed to see. Ja Morant just can't seem to keep himself out of trouble and can't follow some simple rules set for him. So now the Grizzlies are forced to drop the hammer on him, because for the foreseeable future, Ja Morant will be suspended indefinitely from all team activities as the league looks into the situation to give him a proper punishment. So now both teams, who are led by the top picks of the 2019 NBA draft, are in dire situations, and their future is looking really bleak. One can't survive enough to make it to the postseason, and the other one is showing a side we've never seen and is waiting for his fate to be decided upon by Adam Silver and the NBA. This season is as chaotic as it gets when it comes to these two, but that doesn't mean that it'll even get that much better. All you can hope for as fans is for change in the right direction going into next season. That entirely depends on how both players go about the 2024 NBA year. The summer of 2023 for Zion Williamson and Ja Morant was some of the most headline-filled off seasons for a number 1 and 2 pick we've possibly have ever seen of all time. When you hear something like that, you think it's for a very positive reason, but as you've been listening to this video while doing homework, maybe eating some fast food, or sleeping — apparently some of you like to listen to me while you're sleeping — anyways, you should know that these future headlines should be anything but and barely involving basketball. First, we have the final resolution of the Ja Morant gun saga as the NBA has finally made the decision on how to handle things with him. Adam Silver and the league's verdict is a 25-game suspension to start the 2024 season. And with this 25-game suspension, he will be without $7 million of his future contract. Has to go through counseling from the NBA, and worst of all, his team is forced to suffer as they have to figure out how to survive without their all-NBA level point guard for almost a third of the season. Some people thought he deserved a much worse punishment, and some people thought this was just right, as if the Grizzlies struggled, it was purely his fault, and he learned a valuable lesson and being yet another way of showing Ja the impact of his consequences and how much he's relied upon. Him messing up has ramifications on himself, the team, the organizations, many factors all around his life. So honestly, this works for me. Now that that's out of the way, Ja Morant will be out of the public eye until mid-December. But just like clockwork, as soon as one does something, the other one becomes infamous in another way, like in a competition to see who can have the worst career outlook possible PR-wise. And just like Ja Morant's situation, this could have been totally avoided. In June of 2023, Zion Williamson's girlfriend, Akima Love, went public with her pregnancy from Zion Williamson. To many, this was the usual athlete and model couples we see, so all you can hope for is that they're happy and going to be living a nice life together. But that was until a very interesting secret of Zion's past came to light after this announcement. Adult actress Mariah Mills, which I hope my editor doesn't use any images worthy of getting me age restricted for mentioning, came to the public to reveal that her and Zion have been physical for a long time, and even more interesting allegations. Whether it was Zion's willingness to give her money and gifts, her threatening to release tapes of the two, something that nobody wants to see, and many on top of many receipts of conversations between the two. And while she was exposing all this, something got revealed that annoyed many, and it was the fact that Zion Williamson was using his ample amounts of free time during his injury-riddled seasons, was messing with Mariah Mills over and over again, and not focusing, at least to some, on getting back to basketball. For some, this was the final straw. They cannot be a supporter of Zion Williamson if this is how Zion Williamson was treating his career. For me, it's just crazy how you're a top athlete in the NBA and you choose to stick your dick in a porn star, and one like her specifically. Then I gotta remember what Brittany Renner said in one of her infamous car Instagram videos.
First people to deal with are the athletes. None of them use condoms, really. So if y'all really want to try to come up off a check off a man, I mean, you could just fuck an athlete. They're really dumb.
We can talk about the many NBA players who make dumb decisions with their other head, and Zion Williamson is yet another dummy doing dumb things with his dick. And worst of all, Mariah Mills for the rest of the summer would proceed to continue to air out more dirty laundry to get a reaction out of him. But I will give Zion Williamson this: Zion never addressed the situation, which is something I will let him have. But let's just go on and get out of all this. Zion Williamson is healthy once again for the preseason, and he will be the main subject for this season due to the 25-game suspension of Ja Morant. And this time, this is looking to be the season for Zion Williamson. After all this time, the Pelicans have to know how to manage him, and it looks like to be the case for real this time. While he would miss a game every once in a while to manage his health, Zion, for the first time in a long time, is consistently playing games, not getting any major injuries, and the Pelicans are feasting. Sure, he's on a plan similar to Kawhi Leonard, who stays back from playing back-to-backs to keep him as fresh as possible game to game. And finally, the Pelicans are finding a rhythm that makes all parties happy. Zion gets to play in dominating games. The Pelicans get wins off of his efforts and are en route to have their best season with him. Fans finally get the product they want from their local team. And even better, there is some trust from the front office that Zion can be used in a long-term vision, because the trade talks for Zion were getting kind of loud at one point, but that can now be shut down, at least for the time being. But as Zion continues to play more and more, the rumblings of the return of Ja Morant is getting even louder. The Memphis Grizzlies, though, are struggling without Ja Morant and are facing injuries from their other top players that only makes his suspension hurt that much more. By the time he came back to the lineup, the Grizzlies were 6-19 and were very far from the play-in race as one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. If Ja Morant was going to come back and save the season, it was going to take a lot of effort. Finally, though, on December 19, 2023, the Memphis Grizzlies would welcome back Ja Morant to the starting lineup versus the New Orleans Pelicans, funny enough, and came back in an amazing fashion with a 34-point performance and, like something out of a Disney movie, redeemed himself with a game winner in his very first game.
Head of steam with a chance to win it in his return. Here goes Morant. He spins. Morant scores! And the timer expires. Count the basket. And Ja Morant wins it for the Grizzlies.
So this is it. Ja Morant comes back. They proceed to go on a 4-game winning streak with him back in the rotation, and the Grizzlies go on some miracle run that gets Ja Morant back in the good graces of every NBA fan everywhere for his redemption arc. This is how this is supposed to end, right? Why is everyone so quiet?
Memphis Grizzlies superstar Ja Morant, he will undergo season-ending surgery on his right shoulder. That is what the team announced on Monday night. Morant, he had an MRI that revealed an underlying labral tear that will require surgery to repair it.
9 games. He played 9 games. He was suspended for 25, comes back for 9, and then during a workout, he tears his labrum and is now out for the rest of the season. This truly became the season from hell for your Memphis Grizzlies, and the injury to Ja Morant was just a cherry on top of just how much worse things can be. I would say this is the usual cycle at this point, but this is as bad as it gets when it comes to Ja Morant, and just like the usual Zion Williamson cycle, well, all you can hope for is that he comes back better for next season. But man, I am sure this was going to be a tough year to be a Grizzlies fan, where your best player tanks the season at first, and then when he comes back, he tanks it again with another unfortunate circumstance, this time in the form of an injury. But back to Zion full time, the Pelicans are officially becoming a victim of being in the Western Conference. Despite their team having their best season in the Zion era so far, and Zion looking to have his best health season so far, the Western Conference is looking to have 5 teams winning 50 games or more, and they are looking to be in the realm of good, but not good enough. But even if things look kind of interesting from that aspect, the real motivator is the fact that the Pelicans can go on and build from this season and get the team closer to contention with a trade or a key signing, even if they don't win out this year. Funny enough, though, Zion Williamson didn't get voted in to be an all-star this season, but as you look at his stats, it kind of makes sense. He's kind of playing back to his rookie form, but that's only because he is playing with 2 other players who are averaging 20 points per game or more separately. But we always know that doesn't matter unless you just want the money bonus that comes with being an all-star or an all-NBA player. Overall, the Pelicans in Zion's healthiest season ever with 70 games seen a lot to be desired. With one of the best defenses in the NBA, 3 20-point per game scores, and has young talent growing in the starting lineup and on the bench, if they play their cards right, this is a strong future in the making, but it entirely depends on a certain Zion Williamson. As of now, with a 49-33 record in the Western Conference, this would have been good for a 3rd or 4th seed, but in the Western Conference, they are in the 7th seed and have to play in the NBA's play-in tournament versus the Los Angeles Lakers. With the win, they'll face the reigning champions Denver Nuggets, and with a loss and a win, they play against the OKC Thunder again in the first round. And if they somehow lose 2 games in a row, then another wasted season is on the horizon. And this matchup was a very hype one for a good reason. Zion was dominating the paint against the Lakers, but the Pelicans needed more from him, and the team altogether being down at halftime 60-50. And after playing the entire 3rd quarter and scoring 11 more points, the Pelicans are slowly threatening a comeback as Zion continues to terrorize AD and the paint interior of the Los Angeles Lakers. But in the clutch of this game, with only 3 minutes left and the Pelicans only down 2 with a comeback on the way, we are met with the usual result that NBA fans are way too used to by this point.
Go to NBA.com or the NBA app for more. Season high 38 Williamson driving inside.
He is getting absolutely to his spot.
It's a season high 40 for Zion Williamson. The game is tied. Timeout taken. And went to break. You thought you saw him grimacing and in pain.
Well, he's headed to the locker room. We don't know the extent of the injury, but clearly not happy as he heads to the locker room here.
The self-frustration from Zion is unfortunately a very sad thing to see. Season after season after season, he's been dealing with some type of injury that ends things and stops his season early. And even in his best season to date health-wise, he still can't make it to the very end, getting injured at the worst possible moment in one of his best games of the year. And just like last year, it was the same injury that plagued his season the year before, the left leg hamstring. And as the Pelicans proceed to lose versus the Lakers, the world received news that he is going to be out indefinitely, and we already know what that means. They made the playoffs after beating the Kings in the second play-in game, and without Zion, loses to the top-seeded Thunder in a sweep. Same story once again, and it hurts to see it happen over and over and over again to as many fans and the New Orleans Pelicans fan base. What can you do at this point? Because you truly don't know if you have broken goods or if there is a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. At least with Ja Morant, it's a minor incident here and there with his health outside of the recent shoulder incident. But with Zion, you truly have to handle him with kid gloves, because even if there's a chance to make it to the postseason, you just never know if he'll even make it all the way there. We are now 5 years into the experiences of both of these stars, and every season since the beginning, there has always been something new with them that causes some type of concern, and it doesn't get any better as the years go on. The only likely hope is for some type of breakthrough with these two, or something has to be done to finally end things permanently. Going into the 2025 season, there will be a lot to watch out for when it comes to Zion Williamson and Ja Morant, but the main thing people want to know is, will it get any better from here? 5 years. It has been 5 years since Zion Williamson and Ja Morant have been drafted to the NBA, and what do these two have to show for it so far? Zion is known around the league as one of the biggest what-ups in NBA history, while also being known for his extensive injury history and not playing a single minute in the NBA playoffs so far. And if you consider the play-in as part of the playoffs, just know, I don't like you. And for Ja Morant, he is now represented by his actions off the court and not being able to get the job done. After all this time, we've seen the 2019 draft class create 2 more All-Stars recently, and Darius Garland, and later this upcoming season, and Tyler Hero. But overall at mass, there isn't much to enjoy, and these two were meant to be the chosen ones to make it good, or at the bare minimum, be rivals within the class. They have potential, but they really haven't even scratched the surface of what they could be together. So you know how this is going to work. There are expectations for the Grizzlies, and it will all depend on their team altogether alongside Ja Morant. And for the Pelicans, their entire season depends on Zion Williamson's health. But the Pelicans, once again, are going all in for Zion because they trade for DeJounte Murray for the Hawks in exchange for some fodder and Dyson Daniels. Shout out to the future most improved player to give Zion more help and more insurance in case Zion falls apart again. But for once, we do get some good health news from Zion because he starts the season at his lowest weight to date of 280 pounds, less than what he even weighed at Duke. Could be great news when it comes to relieving stress off his body due to the long workload of the season, but we all know what the common thought will be. Will it even make a difference? Well, considering this season is still very much fresh to people's minds, you should already know what is coming. Zion misses the first game due to illness. That's good at least. He plays 5 games in a row, misses a back-to-back. Again, that's pretty normal. And then we meet at the same place. Only in his 5th game of the season, Zion re-injures the same exact body part that he's been struggling with for the last couple years, the left hamstring, and the Pelicans announced him to be out indefinitely without a real timeline of return back to basketball. Do I even need to go further into this one? At this point, when you read on the news that Zion is injured again, you are just numb to the information and just get a sigh of disappointment. It is not even like you're upset at Zion, or at least you shouldn't be. The human body can only take so much stress, and Zion is such a unique basketball player in the first place. Surgery after surgery after surgery. All this time, is there even a way to fix his issues? Who knows? The Pelicans would end up suffering one of the worst injury bugs they've ever seen after this point. 18 games from Brandon Ingram, 20 from Herb Jones, and only 31 games to the newly traded DeJounte Murray. And of course, seeing Dyson Daniels become one of the best defenders in the league and the most improved player. It was hell on earth for anyone who is a fan of the Pelicans, and it really makes you think what the future is going to look like, especially when you see that they would trade Brandon Ingram to Toronto during the trade deadline. And even weirdly enough, Zion Williamson would even have disciplinary issues, missing a team flight when he eventually came back in early January. But by the time he returned, the Pelicans were one of the worst teams in the league, and it wasn't even worth playing, honestly, but it's better than nothing considering their situation. But what about the Memphis Grizzlies? Well, they were back to their usual position. At the All-Star break, they're 36-18 and the second seed in the Western Conference. They own one of the best offenses in the league. Taylor Jenkins is once again making the bench one of the best units in the NBA. And crazy enough, Ja Morant is having his injuries here and there, but at the same time is seeing a decrease in usage, but his team continues to win more and more without him. And this fact should be absolutely celebrated if your team can succeed without you having to do literally everything. That is a big burden off your shoulders as a star. Due to him missing so many games though, he wouldn't be an all-star in 2025, but the main goal should be a championship anyways. So once again, Ja Morant's team can look good while he's out, saving him for the playoffs, while Zion Williamson, well, his team can't survive without him, even though this season is something completely one of a kind for them. Now, in the final stretch of the season, you consider this season to be relatively, I guess, not controversial in any way. Zion still can't stay healthy, which people are far too used to, and the Grizzlies are on a roll and are having fun competing for a top 4 seed again for home court advantage in the very much wild Western Conference. But after the All-Star break, things are looking kind of rocky. The Grizzlies are slowly looking worse and worse, losing the first 6 out of their 8 games and then basically becoming inconsistent from that point on. This is a pretty bad time to be dropping off, as each time they lose, they get closer and closer to being a part of the middle of the pack and not having a guaranteed playoff spot. Maybe just a bad stretch, it happens, but this isn't the time for that to happen. But if that weird drop-off was a red flag, then the entire NBA world was going to see yet another one that would make sense to absolutely nobody.
We start the show with some breaking news out of Memphis. The Grizzlies announced that they have parted ways with head coach Taylor Jenkins. Jenkins spent almost 6 years in Memphis and has the most wins in franchise history while at the helm. President and GM of basketball operations, Zach Kleiman, had this to say about Jenkins, quote, "I'm genuinely appreciative of Taylor's contributions to this team and the city over the past 6 seasons. This was a difficult decision given the consistent and tangible development of our players and overall success under Taylor's leadership. I wish Taylor the very best."
6 years, 250 wins, shit, most in Grizzlies history, and possibly one of the best player development coaches in this league. Taylor Jenkins has been fired from the Memphis Grizzlies and everyone is confused. Sure, they haven't made it anywhere past the first round outside of 1 year, but you can't deny that Taylor Jenkins knows how to get the absolute best out of his team, routinely making a top 10 team in both offense and defense, and is routinely creating a top scoring bench mob. The best argument I've seen is the fact that the Memphis Grizzlies are the Western version of the Knicks, struggling to beat any of the top teams in the league, and they only just bully those who are worse than them. But I don't put much merit in that, but then we get our real answer from Shams and everything ends up making much more sense, and it's very concerning. First, the Memphis Grizzlies would force 2 new assistants onto the team who never even met with Taylor Jenkins before interviews, and both were hired to implement a new and improved, at least originally, offensive system. A system that clashed with what Taylor Jenkins had been developing and perfecting for years, and people see this as the figureheads in Memphis trying to strong-arm something that they think will work and potentially hiring Jenkins' replacement in front of his very eyes. And unfortunately, it happened. The funny thing is, according to ESPN, Jenkins went along with what they had in plan and didn't really argue that it couldn't work, but the Grizzlies were winning games from it, and honestly, there's not much to say. But the problem is a certain someone didn't like the system, and his name is Ja Morant, our second red flag. Someone who is used to being the star of the show and with the ball in his hands at all times and dictating games, and let's not act like he's not. But when you suddenly have changes like that, I can only imagine he wasn't a fan of playing more off the ball. And again, It just makes for a very interesting conversation. But within this piece from ESPN, there is many examples of Ja Morant showing no enthusiasm about the new system, the firing of an assistant that he likes, and how he feels about, again, playing more off the ball. To some, this is another hit on Ja Morant's PR being treated as a coach killer, but those people got it wrong. The Memphis Grizzlies front office and owner created this problem and was going to make it happen either way. It's just weird that they did it at the end of the regular season rather than after the playoffs, where it would look a lot more natural. But the main rumor that came from this firing is a potential trade for Ja Morant coming in the offseason, but even that can be potentially a Hail Mary of a rumor. And now, an unfortunate news story from Ja. He is now reveling in the villain storyline and not caring about the PR at this point, doing an interesting gesture on the court after he makes a basket involving him holding some finger guns and shooting. He proceeded to get fined $75K after this stunt and give us a very interesting quote after the incident. I'm kind of used to it. I'm pretty much a villain for 2 years now. Every little thing, if someone could say something negative about me, it's going to be out there. So yeah, I don't care no more. Yep, that's very encouraging if you're Adam Silver, but at least he graduated from guns and is now using grenades instead, I guess. I wouldn't care as much without the prior context, but considering what Ja's past history is, it's kind of interesting that he isn't trying to stay on his very best behavior. But as they end their season after the All-Star break 12-16 and finish 48-34, they suffer the same issue from their last years of contention. 5 teams in the West with 50 wins or more, and their 48 wins is only good enough for the 8th seed after tiebreakers. The Western Conference will forever stay wild. So you know how this will go. I mean, we're in the playoffs right now, so hopefully this is still fresh in your mind. They'd start by getting beaten by the Golden State Warriors because Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler combined for 75 points together. They destroyed the hobbled Mavericks, and they would earn the 8th spot, which gave them a meeting with the OKC Thunder in the first round. Now, honestly, in my honest opinion, I thought this would be a fun and competitive series because compared to 8th seeds historically, this Memphis Grizzlies team is one of the best you can possibly think of. But this series was anything but. 51-point loss in game 1, 19-point loss in game 2, a 6-point loss in game 3, which included another injury highlight reel for Lou Dort, unfortunately, on Ja Morant. Yes, I know it was a genuine mistake, but still a horrible way to go out. And now, with Ja missing the next game with the series on the line, the Grizzlies gave it their all at home and lost by 2 measly points, ending yet another season. Now, both teams are filled with uncertainty. One can't get their generational player on the court consistently and keep investing in him with no avail, and now the other has a very interesting summer ahead of him because of a surprise coaching change. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong, and the only ways things can change for both of these teams is either through a breakthrough in some kind or tearing it all down and starting over. And while one is considering it, the other might need a few more years convincing to make a move like that. But all I know is these two careers are still very much young, and there still might be hope for a turnaround at some point. Just maybe not with the teams that they started their careers with. But either way you look at it, this is going to be a very interesting offseason this summer. What was supposed to be the automatic top players in this class has been anything but for many reasons. Zion has played 214 games in 6 seasons, never played a playoff game. His body continues to fail him at every stage, and no matter what the Pelicans do to make his job easier, they continue to get nothing in return. And for Ja, who's had more team success so far, sure, has injury issues of his own, an extensive off-the-court problem, and is now hinting he might not care anymore about his PR, and is just wanting to continue to be him, and is now in an interesting place with his own team as they move on from his coach, and could very much do the same from a personnel standpoint. But overall though, what have we learned? Well, the major talking point is that there is truly no such thing as a guarantee in this league. Even with how poor the 2019 class turned out to be, even to this day, many people thought that at least the number 1 and number 2 pick of this class would save the entirety of this draft and would stand way above the rest. But what is funny is that out of the 6 years they've been in this league, Darius Garland has as many All-Star appearances as Zion and Ja Morant has right now, and could potentially even jump them next year. But this is just how crazy and unpredictable the NBA and draft process can be. Anyways, the future of these two superstars can still very much be bright. Both of them are still in their mid-20s and are going to be reaching their prime soon and still have plenty of time to figure it out. But the funny thing is that each of their own versions of figuring it out is pretty unique. Zion needs to get healthy consistently, or in the most dramatic circumstance, the dude will have to be treated like Kawhi Leonard. And as a Clippers fan, that's not a fate I want to see anyone go through. If his body truly can't handle it, even with this strategy, he is a ticking time bomb no matter what. And with the trade rumors looking the way it is, whoever gets him is going to have a plan in mind for the former #1 overall pick. And for Ja Morant, who is in a much more stable situation, it's pretty similar. You just gotta hope that the minor injuries can stop eventually. And I hate to say this about a person who's only a month older than me, but is it so hard to ask a grown man to be on his best behavior? He should have learned his lesson during the 25-game suspension to show how much his team needs him. And if he's being a bonehead, then his team suffers more than him. But who knows? In the worst case scenario, he will be used as an example of what not to do as an NBA player. But if he does chill out and the Grizzlies finally figure it out, they can be back to competing for something eventually. But as we learned throughout this entire video, no matter how much of a guarantee something may be, there is truly no such thing. And the chaotic careers of the 2019's NBA's biggest draft stars should be a clear example of that. With that being said, tell me what team or player timeline or retrospective you'd like to see next, your thoughts on this video and topic, and until next time.